Chapter 40. The second we walked past Agent Starman's, who was stationed in the hallway, and into the hotel room, Michael scanned our faces. "You spoke to Leah," he concluded. "Where is she?" "She infiltrated Serenity Ranch." Sterling addressed those words to Judd, who didn't look any happier about Leah's absence than we were. "Leah infiltrated a cult," Michael repeated. He shot an incredulous look at Dean. "And you didn't drag her home kicking and screaming?" "Don't start with me, Townsend." A muscle in Dean's jaw ticked. "Consider me warned." Judd ignored the tension brewing between Michael and Dean and focused his attention on Agent Sterling. "Is Leah in any immediate danger?" Agent Sterling's answer was as terse as Judd's question. "I don't think Darby has avoided formal charges for this long by overtly abusing newcomers before he's had a chance to fully indoctrinate them." In other words, as long as Holland Darby bought the persona Leah was presenting to him, the lost lamb in need of guidance, she was probably safe. For now. "Will she be discreet?" Judd addressed that question to Dean. "Discreet?" Michael repeated incredulously. "Are we talking about the same Leah Zhang here? The one who expresses her displeasure with relationship partners by threatening to duct tape them naked to the ceiling?" "Leah knows how this game is played," Dean told Judd. And then he turned back toward Michael, the muscles in his neck and shoulders as tense as his jaw. "So now you and Leah are in a relationship?" "Excuse me?" "You weren't in a relationship in New York when we went to find Celine," Dean said. "The second things got tough, you pushed Leah away." "I'm confused, Redding," Michael said, taking a lazy step toward Dean. "Is talking about our feelings something you and I do now?" Leaving Leah at Serenity Ranch had taken everything Dean had. He'd done it because he trusted her, because trusting Leah and offering her honesty in exchange for every lie was the way he'd made it past her walls. But walking away had cost him. His temper was already frayed, and Michael's flippant tone wasn't helping. "You're not good enough for her," Dean told Michael, his voice low. "If you were even the least bit capable of caring about anyone but yourself, Leah wouldn't have gone in alone. She did this to you as much as for the rest of us." "Dean!" I said sharply. Michael held up a hand. "Let the man speak, Colorado. I do love it when he who has literally tortured someone in this room casts stones." "Michael?" As the person Dean had tortured, back when he was a child trying to help her escape his father's grasp, Agent Sterling didn't appreciate the reference. "You should have known," Dean told Michael between gritted teeth. "If Leah was on the verge of taking off, if this case cut too close to home, if she was itching to get out of her own skin, if she needed to fight back, you should have known." "You think I don't know that?" Michael got in Dean's face. "You think I wanted her to leave?" For a moment, I thought Dean would de-escalate things, but then he leaned forward to speak directly into Michael's ear. "I think you don't know how to do anything but take a punch." 1 second, they were standing there, and the next, they were on the floor. Michael swung at Dean, who grappled for better positioning and pinned Michael to the ground. "Stop!" The word exited Sloane's mouth in a whisper. "Stop! Stop! Stop!" She'd been silent since we'd made it back, and as her volume escalated to a yell, the boys froze. I'd never seen Dean pick a fight with Michael before. I'd never seen the two of them in an all-out brawl. "It's not Michael's fault." Sloane's voice was barely audible. "It's mine." She moved backward until she hit the wall. I saw Leah leaving. She asked me not to tell. Sloane sucked in a breath, her middle finger on her right hand tapping against her thumb. She was counting something, counting and unable to pull it together. We'd just gotten back and she changed clothes. She was wearing white, and Leah only wears white 13% of the time. I should have known.
Sloane, Judd said gently. Sweetheart.
I offered to go with her,
Sloane continued, picking up the pace of both her words and her tapping.
She said no. She said...
Sloane looked down.
She said I'd just get in the way.
You knew how much that would hurt Sloane, Leah. You knew. Objectively, I could see that Leah had been trying to protect our most vulnerable member, but Sloane didn't know that. She wouldn't understand it even if I tried to explain what the combination of anger, fear, and dread that Michael had seen in Kane Darby had drudged up for Leah. Years later, it can still hit you in a moment. Dean was wrong. This wasn't about Michael, or what had happened in New York, or any of us. This was about ghosts that Leah had never faced. Agent Sterling's phone rang then, and as I told Sloane that none of it, was her fault, my brain was already processing the shift in my mentor's demeanor. The identity of the caller was clear in the way Sterling stood, her shoulders squared to ward off emotion, her free hand dangling loosely by her side.
I take it you got my messages about Gaither?
Sterling didn't say that Briggs should have called her back sooner. She didn't ask why he hadn't.
Leah's gone AWOL to infiltrate the local cult.
Agent Sterling set the phone to speaker. One more layer of distance between herself and Briggs.
If the man in charge is hiding something, Leah will find it. But if he realizes she's looking, if anyone in his camp suspects she's with the FBI, this won't go well.
There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment.
Am I on speaker?
Briggs asked, his tone reminding me that he didn't have his ex-wife's impenetrable control.
You are.
Briggs processed Agent Sterling's answer and her tone before proceeding.
What do we think the chances are that someone in the Gaither cult has ties to the Masters?
I registered the logic behind that question. We'd come to Gaither looking for members of one cult. We'd found another. Those people had been implicated in at least one set of murders, those of Anna and Todd Kyle. What were the chances that there were more victims? Leah's situation was precarious enough. But if the Masters had a tie to Serenity Ranch, she could be in more danger than we knew. The killings started today, I said, reading into the fact that it had taken him this long to return Agent Sterling's call.
Didn't they? April 2nd.
Sloane shivered.
4-2.
Briggs's silence answered that question. Finally, he elaborated.
Victim was a female, he said, clipping the words. Early 20s, abducted from a college campus. She was found in an open field, strapped to a scarecrow's post.
Burned alive, I filled in. I swallowed hard.
We can't leave Gaither,
Dean told Briggs. Not without Leah.
I'm not asking you to.
Agent Briggs was the type of person who developed and executed plans, the type who never backed down.
You keep working the case in Gaither, he continued. Give Leah the chance to dig into Darby. And then, Ronnie...
Agent Sterling didn't bat an eye at the nickname or the emotion that made its way into Briggs's voice as he said it.
Get her out.
You aren't surprised when they come for you. You don't remember the hours following your conversation with Five, but you remember his words. You knew that it was only a matter of time before you were asked to pass judgment. Of the 9 seats at the table, 4 are filled at this midnight conference. Yours makes 5.
There is a threat. Five has laid his knife on the table for you to see. I believe the situation to be worthy of the Pythia's counsel. There is a promise in his tone. He will slice and dice and cut and bleed you, then ask you whether your daughter and her friends should live or die. There is no threat. You speak like one who knows the truth of things, like one who has seen that which mortal eyes may never see. They pay you no heed. Two is on the verge of losing his seat to the acolyte. This may be his last chance to hear you scream, to burn you, if Five and his knife prove less than convincing. Four believes himself a man of great discernment. You can already feel his fingers closing in around your neck. It would be so easy to run and hide, deep inside your own head, to go away from this place, from the pain. The FBI is closing in. The fifth member of this quorum is the one who has never laid a hand on you. The one you loathe, the one you fear. In my judgment, their very presence in Gaither makes this group a threat. They are not yours to judge. Your voice is dangerous, low. This is the lie that you must sell. You are what they have made you. You are judge and jury, and without a fifth vote, they cannot put you through the rites. It will happen. Tomorrow, the next day at the latest, but for now. The door opens. You recognize the person who stands there, and you see now what you should have seen before. There are 9 seats at the table. You sentenced 7 to die. You knew his seat would not remain empty. You knew that the master who trained him would return to the fold. But you didn't know. Didn't know. Shall we begin again? Five picks up his knife, his smile spreading. 6 seats filled. 5 votes, excluding yours.
Chapter 41. The next morning, we still hadn't heard from Leah. If Ree noticed we were one short as we slid into our booth at the Nada Diner, she didn't comment on it. "What can I get you?"
Just coffee.
Dean's voice was barely audible. He hadn't slept and wouldn't until Leah was out of that place. "Coffee," Ree repeated. "And a side of bacon. Cassie?" "Coffee." Ree didn't even ask Sloane and Michael what they wanted. She gave us a look. "I heard your friend has fallen under Holland Darby's spell." I wondered if she'd also heard, from her grandson, that we were with the FBI. You might not say anything if you had. You know how to keep a secret. You know when to keep your mouth closed.
Leah's coming back.
Dean's voice was quiet, but his expression was hard. Ree eyed Dean. "That's what I thought when my daughter joined Darby's flock. She split town, and I never heard from her again." "You weren't surprised when your daughter left." Michael was entering dangerous territory, pressing Ree on this, but I let him do it. "Her daddy hightailed it out of Gaither when I was pregnant. Sarah was always more like him than me, full of big dreams and restless in her own skin, always looking for the promise of something more."
"Holland Darby is big on promises,"
Dean commented, assessing Ree.
"You're not."
Ree pursed her lips.
"We, every one of us, reap what we sow. I hope your friend makes it out, but don't let her choices pull you down in the meantime. Life is full of drowning people, ready and willing to drown you too. The door to the diner opened. With a harumph at the person who stood there, Ree disappeared back into the kitchen. Beside me, Dean laid one hand over mine. The person who'd just walked in was Kane Darby. I knew, from the moment that his gaze landed on our table, that he hadn't seen me the day before at the Apothecary Museum, but that he recognized me now. Gut-punched, Michael told me under his breath, his eyes methodically scanning Kane's face, his posture. Like he can't decide whether to smile or throw up. Staring at the man, I could suddenly remember riding on his shoulders when I was very small. If Michael had read my expression, he probably would have said that I looked gut-punched too. "If you need an icebreaker," Sloane told me, pitching her voice in a whisper, "you should tell him that 80% of Americans believe that a weevil is similar to a weasel, when in reality, it's a type of insect." Thanks, Sloane. I squeezed Dean's hand once, then stood, crossing the room until Kane Darby and I were standing face to face. "You look like your mother." Kane's voice was muted, like he thought I was a dream, and if he spoke too loudly, he might wake up. I shook my head. "She was beautiful, and I searched for the right words. "I can fade into the background. She never learned how." I realized, as I said those words, that there was a part of me that had always believed that if my mother and I were more alike, if she'd been less of a performer, if she hadn't been the center of attention just walking through a room, she might still be here. Women shouldn't have to fade into the background to be safe. Kane's response told me that he could read me, nearly as well as I could read him. "You heard what happened to my mom?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "It's a small town." I assessed him for a moment, then went straight for the jugular. "Why did my mother leave you? We were happy here. She was happy. And then we left, with no warning, in the middle of the night." Until I'd said the words, I hadn't realized that I had any memory of leaving Gaither, other than dancing with my mother on the side of the road. Kane looked at me, really looked at me this time, instead of just seeing my mom in my features. "Lorelei had every right to leave, Cassie, and every right to take you with her." "What happened?" I repeated the question, hoping for an answer. "This town wasn't a good place for your mom, or for you. I kept things from her. I thought I could shield her from what it meant to be with me here." "Your father isn't well liked in Gaither," I spoke out loud, instead of profiling him in my head. "You broke away from him, but you stayed local." I thought back to the memory of Kane sweeping me into his arms after a nightmare. "When my mom and I left, you didn't follow." "Did you resent her for leaving? Did you keep track of her? Did you find a way, years later, to make her yours?" I couldn't ask a single one of those questions out loud, so instead, I asked him about Leah. Kane glanced around the diner. "Can we take a walk?" In other words, he didn't want an audience for what he was about to say. Knowing I would catch hell for it, I followed him out the door. "My father prizes certain things." Kane waited until we were a block away from the diner before he began speaking. "Loyalty, honesty, obedience. He won't hurt your friend. Not physically. He'll just slowly become more and more important to her, until she's not sure what she'd be without him, until she'll do anything he asks. And anytime she doubts herself or doubts him, there'll be someone there to whisper in her ear about how lucky she is, how special." "Were you lucky?" I asked Kane. "Special?" "I was the golden son." His voice was so even, so controlled, that I couldn't hear even a tinge of bitterness underneath.
You left, I commented. When that didn't engender a response, I pressed on. What happens if Leah wants to leave?
He won't stop her, Kane said. Not at first.
Those 3 words sent a chill down my spine. Not at first.
I wish I could do something, Cassie. I wish that I'd had any right to keep your mother here, or to go after her once she was gone. But I am my father's son. I made my choices long ago, and I accept what those choices have cost me.
I'd wondered why Kane Darby had stayed in Gaither. What if staying isn't an act of loyalty? What if it's penance? My mind traveled back to Mason Kyle, Kane Darby's childhood friend. What choices did you make? What exactly are you repenting?
I never stopped thinking about you.
Kane stopped walking.
I know I wasn't your father. I know that to you, I'm probably just some guy who briefly dated your mom. But, Cassie, you were never just some kid to me.
My chest tightened.
So, please, listen to me when I say that you need to leave Gaither. It isn't safe for you to be here. It isn't safe for you to be asking questions. Your friend will be okay at Serenity, but you wouldn't be. Do you understand what I'm telling you?
You're telling me that your father is a dangerous man. I paused. And that my mother left this town for a reason.
You. 5 admires his handiwork as blood drips down your arms, your legs. It will be hours before the others return. Hours before they ask you if Cassie and her friends should die.
No, no, no.
That's Lorelei's answer. That will always be Lorelei's answer. But Lorelei isn't strong enough to bear this. Lorelei isn't here right now. You are.
Chapter 42. There was a thin line between a warning and a threat. I wanted to believe that Kane Darby had been warning me, not threatening me, when he'd suggested I leave town. But if my time with the FBI had taught me anything, it was that violence didn't always simmer just below the surface. Sometimes, the serial killer across from you quoted Shakespeare. Sometimes, the most dangerous people were the ones you trusted most. Kane Darby's non-confrontational manner wasn't any more natural than Michael's tendency to wave red flags at any and all passing bulls. That kind of steadiness could have come from one of 2 places. Either he'd grown up in an environment where emotion was seen as unseemly and outbursts were punished accordingly, or staying calm had been his way of seizing control in an environment where someone else's volatile emotions had served as landmines. As I rolled that over in my mind, Dean fell in beside me.
I made a promise to the universe, he said, that if Leah gets out of this unscathed, I'll go 48 hours without brooding. I will purchase a colored t-shirt. I'll sing karaoke and let Townsend pick out my song.
He cast a sideways glance at me.
Did you learn anything from talking to Darby's son?
The answer to Dean's question sat heavy and unspoken in my throat as we made our way down Main Street, past Victorian storefronts and historical markers, until the wrought iron gate of the apothecary garden came into view. Kane said that he was the golden son, I said finally, finding my voice. He blames himself for that. I think staying in Gaither was a form of penance for him. Punishment for, and I quote, choices he made long ago.
You're talking about him, Dean observed, not to him.
I'm talking to you.
Or?
Dean countered softly as we came to a stop outside the garden.
You're scared to go too deep.
In the entire time I'd known him, Dean had never pushed me further into another person's perspective than I wanted to go. At best, he curtailed his protective instincts, profiled with me, or got out of my way. But right now, I wasn't the one that Dean would have given anything to protect. You came very close to remembering something back at your old house. Something that a part of you is desperate to forget. I know you, Cassie, and I just keep thinking that if you forgot an entire year of your life, it wasn't because you were little, and it wasn't the result of some kind of trauma. You've been through 2 lifetimes of trauma just since I've met you, and you haven't forgotten a thing. I was a child, I countered, feeling like he'd hit me. My mother and I left in the middle of the night. We didn't tell anyone. We didn't say goodbye. Something happened, and we just left. And after you left, Dean took my hand in his. It was just you and your mother. She was all you had. You were her everything, and she wanted you to forget. She wanted you to dance it off. What are you saying? I asked Dean. I'm saying that I think that you forgot the life you lived in Gaither for her. I'm saying that I don't think you're the one that your brain was protecting. I think it was protecting the only relationship you had left. Dean gave me a moment to process, then pushed on. I'm saying that you couldn't afford to remember the life you had here, because then you would have had to be angry that she took it away. He paused. You would have to be angry, he continued, switching to the present tense, that she made sure you never had that again. She made you the center of her life and herself the center of yours. And knowing what we know now, about the Masters, about the Pythia, I think you're even more terrified than you were as a child about what might happen if you do remember Gaither. And that's why I'm using the third person when I talk to you about Kane Darby? I asked sharply, stepping past the gates and walking the stone path of the apothecary garden, Dean 2 steps behind me. Because getting close to him might mean getting close to my mother? Because I might remember something I don't want to know? Dean walked behind me in silence. You're wrong. I'd done everything I could to see my mother through a profiler's eyes and not a child's. She'd been a con woman. She'd made sure that I had no one to depend on but her. She'd loved me more than anything. Forever and ever, no matter what. Maybe I did forget Gaither for her sake, I said quietly, allowing Dean to catch up with me. I was good at reading people, even as a kid. I would have known that she didn't want to talk about it, that she needed to believe that none of it had mattered, that the 2 of us didn't need anyone or anything else. My mom had let herself care about Kane Darby. She'd let him in, not just into her life, but into mine. Based on the rest of my childhood, she'd learned her lesson. What happened? Why did you leave him? Why did you leave Gaither? I came to a standstill in front of an oleander, its reddish-pink blooms deceptively cheerful for a poisonous plant. Kane said that Leah would be safe, I told Dean, cutting to the heart of the matter. For now. I wanted to stop there, but I didn't. He also said that I wouldn't be safe in her position. Darby doesn't know who and what Leah is. Dean captured my gaze, unwilling to let me look away. If you wouldn't be safe there, she's not either. This was Dean asking me to stop pulling back, asking me to remember, and all I could think was that he shouldn't have had to ask. I swallowed, my mouth dry as I began profiling Kane, the right way this time. My mother once told you that she didn't deserve you, but she didn't know your secrets, the choices you had made. Saying the words out loud made them real. I kept my gaze on Dean's, let his deep brown eyes study me, even as I could feel my entire life, my entire worldview begin to shift under my feet. You said that you didn't deserve her, didn't deserve us, but you wanted it. You wanted a family, and you were good at being there for her and for me. Saying the words physically hurt, and I had no idea why. There had to be some shred of that desire, some kernel of what it meant to be a family in your background. Setting aside loyalty, honesty, obedience, and any other buzzword that dominated your childhood, you cared about people. And because you cared, you did horrible things. Kane Darby was a man who'd been punishing himself for decades. Maybe he'd let himself believe, when he'd met my mother, that it was finally enough, that he could have her, that he could have a family. But yours will never let you go. I thought about Kane trying to intervene with Shane, trying to mitigate his own father's harm. And then I thought about Dean, standing beside me in this garden, his blonde hair falling into his face. What Kane had been to my mother, Dean was to me. Like Kane, Dean had spent years keeping a tight rein on his emotions. He'd spent years convinced that there was something dark and twisted inside of him, and that if he wasn't careful, he would someday become his father. All of us had a way of regaining the control that life had taken from us. For Sloane, it was numbers. For Leah, it was keeping her true self buried beneath layers of lies. Michael intentionally provoked anger instead of waiting for someone else's fuse to blow. Dean did everything he could to keep his emotions in check. And I used knowing things about people as an excuse to keep them from knowing me. Becoming a part of the Naturals program had meant letting a piece of that control go. For years, you were my everything. I wasn't talking to Kane now. I was talking to my mother. You kept me from my father's family. You made me the center of your world, and yourself the center of mine. I wrapped my arms around Dean's neck. I felt his pulse steady against mine. His fingertips traced the edge of my jaw. I pressed my lips to his, let them part. I tasted and wanted and felt him, and I remembered. Mommy kissing Kane. The first day of school. Coloring at Ree's. Melody in the garden.
What's the matter, scaredy cat?
Melody is pigtails and skinned knees, and bossy hands on bossy hips.
It's just the poison garden.
She squats down next to a plant.
If you don't come in, I'm going to eat this leaf. I'll eat it right up and die. No, you won't,
I say, taking a step toward her. She plucks a leaf off the plant and opens her mouth. You kids stop horsing around in there. I turn around. There's an old man standing behind us. He looks mad and mean, and he's wearing long sleeves even though it's summer. Rough white lines and ugly puckered pink ones snake out from underneath his shirt. Scars. How old are you? The man demands. I know with all of my being that he's wearing long sleeves because those aren't his only scars.
I'm 7,
Melody answers, coming to stand beside me.
But Cassie's only 6.
The memory jumps, and suddenly I'm running home. I'm running. Nighttime now. I'm in bed. There's a thump. Muted voices. Something's wrong. I know that, and I think about the old man in the garden. He got mad at Melody and me. Maybe he's here. Maybe he's angry. Maybe he's going to eat me right up. Another thump. A scream. Mommy? I'm at the top of the stairs now. There's something at the bottom. Something big. Something lumpy. And suddenly, my mother is on the stairs, kneeling in front of me. Go back to sleep, baby. There's blood on her hands.
Did the old man come?
I ask.
Did he hurt you?
My mother presses her lips to my head. It's just a dream. I came out of the memory with my body still pressed against Dean's. My head buried in his shoulder, his hands combing gently through my hair. There was blood on my mother's hands, I whispered. The night my mom and I left Gaither, I heard something. A fight, maybe? I went to the top of the stairs, and there was something at the bottom. I swallowed, my mouth so dry the words wouldn't come. There was blood on her hands, Dean.
I forced them out anyway and didn't let myself stop.
And then we left.
I thought about the rest of the memory. There's something else? Dean asked. I nodded.
The day we left,
I said, pushing back from his chest.
I'm fairly certain I met Malcolm Lowell.
Chapter 43. Nightshade's grandfather still lived in a house on a hill overlooking the Serenity Ranch compound. Malcolm Lowell was pushing 90, confined to a wheelchair, and, as his home health aide informed Agents Sterling and Starmans, not up for visitors. Agent Sterling didn't take no for an answer. Back at the hotel, I sat between Dean and Sloane as we watched the live feed from Sterling's lapel camera, all too aware of the risk Agent Sterling was taking by flashing her badge. If word got around that Sterling was FBI, Holland Darby might start to consider Leah a liability. As the nurse reluctantly allowed Sterling and Starmans into the massive house, my mind went to what I'd remembered. The stairs, something at the bottom. In my 6-year-old mind, the scary old man who'd yelled at Melody and me and the events that had transpired that night were integrally related, but from a more mature perspective, I could see that they might well be two independent, traumatic events, linked in my mind only by their proximity to each other in time. An intimidating old man had scared me, and that night something had happened, something that had ended with blood. Mr. Lowell. Agent Sterling took a seat across from a man who appeared no older than he had a decade earlier. He was wearing a long-sleeved shirt, just as he had then. The scars were still visible. As a child, they'd scared me. Now, they told me that Malcolm Lowell had woken up every day for the past 33 years with a very visible reminder of the attack that had left his daughter and son-in-law dead.
I'm Special Agent Sterling with the FBI.
Agent Sterling let her posture mimic his, straight and uncompromising, despite his age.
This is Agent Starmans. We need to ask you some questions.
Malcolm Lowell was silent for several seconds, and then he spoke.
No, he said. I don't believe you do.
She wants to ask you some questions, I thought. There's a difference.
We have reason to believe that your family's tragedy may be related to a current serial murder investigation.
Agent Sterling danced the line between offering specifics and offering truth.
I need to know what you know about the original murders.
Lowell's right hand crept up his left sleeve, running his fingertips over a scar.
I told the police what I knew, he grunted. Nothing else to tell. Your grandson is dead.
Agent Sterling made no attempt to soften those words.
He was murdered, and we would like, very much, to find his killer.
I glanced to Michael.
Grief, Michael said, and nothing but.
Malcolm Lowell had disowned his grandson when the boy was 9 years old, but more than 30 years later, he mourned his passing.
If you know something, Agent Sterling said, anything that might help us find the person who attacked you. I was stabbed repeatedly, Agent.
Lowell met Agent Sterling's gaze, his own uncompromising.
In my arms, my legs, my stomach, and my chest. Did your grandson witness the attack?
Agent Sterling asked. No response.
Did he participate in the attack?
No response.
He's shutting down,
Michael told Agent Sterling over the audio feed.
Whatever emotions your questions might have provoked a couple of decades ago, he won't let himself feel anything now. Sound familiar?
Dean asked me. I thought of Nightshade, stonewalling the FBI the exact same way his grandfather was now. He'd learned the power of silence firsthand.
Ask him about my mother, I said.
Agent Sterling did me one better. She withdrew a picture.
one I hadn't even been aware that the FBI had. In the picture, my mother was standing on stage, her eyes rimmed in thick black liner, her face alive with expression. "Do you recognize this woman?" "Eyesight isn't what it used to be." Malcolm Lowell barely even glanced at the picture. "Her name was Lorelei Hobbs." Agent Sterling let those words hang in the air, using silence as her own weapon. "I remember her," Lowell said finally. "Used to let her little girl run wild with Ree Simon's hellions. Trouble, the lot of them." "Like your grandson was trouble?" Agent Sterling asked softly. "Like your daughter before him?" That got a reaction. Lowell's hands balled themselves into fists, loosened, and balled up again. "He's getting agitated," Michael told Sterling. "Anger, disgust." "Mr. Lowell," Agent Sterling prompted. "I tried to teach my Anna, tried to keep her home, safe. And how did she end up? Pregnant at 16, sneaking out." His voice trembled. "And that boy, her son, he cut a hole in the fence, found his way down to that godforsaken compound." Lowell closed his eyes. He lowered his head until I couldn't make out a single one of his features on screen. "That's when the animals started showing up." "The animals?" Sloane said, cocking her head to the side. Clearly, she hadn't foreseen that admission. Neither had I. The difference was that I knew immediately that when Malcolm Lowell said animals, he meant dead animals. "They weren't clean kills." Lowell looked back up at the camera, a hard glint in his eyes. "Those animals died slowly, and they died in pain." "You thought Mason was responsible?" Agent Starmans asked, speaking for the first time. There was a long pause. "I thought he watched." You've been chained to the wall for hours, bleeding for hours. But really, you've been chained and bleeding for years. Before this place, before chaos or order, before knives and poison and flame. You are the one who lay in Lorelei's bed as a child. You took what she couldn't. You did what she couldn't. As the seconds and minutes and hours tick by, you can feel her, ready to stop hiding, ready to come out. Not this time. This time, you're not going anywhere. This time, you're here to stay. Night falls. The masters return. They have no idea who you are, what you are. They're used to Lorelei's dramatics. Let them see yours. Chapter 44. I was aware, as the clock ticked past midnight, that another day had passed without answers. April 4th. Somewhere, Agent Briggs was waiting for the master's next victim to turn up, strapped to a scarecrow post and burned alive. Unable to sleep, I sat on the counter of our kitchenette, staring out into the night and thinking about Mason Kyle and Kane Darby, dead animals, and the large, lumpy shape at the bottom of those stairs. It was a body. I hadn't seen that at the age of 6, but even with a fragmented memory, I knew it now. I'd been trying not to know it, trying not to remember since I'd gotten back in town. No offense, but you have the survival instincts of a lemming. I jumped at the sound of those words and scrambled off the counter. Leah stepped out of the shadows. Relax, she said. I come in peace. She smirked. Mostly. Leah was wearing the uniform I'd seen on the rest of Holland Darby's people, not the white peasant top she'd been wearing when I saw her last. In all the time I'd known her, she'd never ceded control of her wardrobe to another person. In all the time I'd known her, she'd never looked so blank. "How did you get past Agent Starman's?" I asked her. "The same way I got out of Serenity Ranch. Sneaking around is just another form of lying, and God knows my body is even more talented at deception than my mouth." Something in Leah's words triggered an alarm in my head. "What happened?" "I got in, and I got out," Leah shrugged. "Holland Darby likes making claims. That he would never hurt me. That he understands me. That Serenity Ranch has nothing to hide. All lies. Of course, the most interesting piece of deception I picked up on wasn't from Darby. It was from his wife." I tried to remember what the police files had said about Mrs. Darby, but she'd been little more than a footnote, a fixture in the background of the Holland Darby show. "She told me they had nothing to do with what happened to that poor family all those years ago." Leah gave me a moment to process the fact that she'd seen deception in that claim. "And she said that she loved her son." "She doesn't?" I thought of the Kane my mother had known, and then I thought about the body at the foot of the stairs, the blood on my mother's hands. There was a thump. Had Kane been there? Had he done something? Had my mother? It isn't safe for you to be asking questions. Kane's warning echoed in my mind. Your friend will be okay at Serenity, but you wouldn't be. Agent Sterling, talk to Malcolm Lowell. As I sorted through the bevy of thoughts in my head, I caught Leah up on what I knew. Back before Nightshade's parents were murdered, someone at Serenity Ranch had developed a fondness for killing animals. Cheery, Leah opined. She reached past me and helped herself to a $4 Dr. Pepper from the mini fridge. As she did, I caught sight of her wrist. Angry red lines crisscrossed the exposed skin. You cut yourself? My mouth went dry. Of course not. Leah turned her wrist over to examine the damage as she lied to my face. Those lines just magically appeared and were not in any way a method by which to make sure Darby bought my story about how empty I feel inside. Hurting yourself isn't the same as donning a costume, Leah. I expected her to shrug the words off, but instead she met my eyes. This didn't hurt, she told me quietly. Not really. Not in any way that mattered. You're not okay. My voice was every bit as quiet as hers. You weren't okay before you went there, and you sure as hell aren't okay now. I forgot what it was like, Leah said, her voice absolutely devoid of expression. To be special one moment and nothing the next. I thought about what Dean had told me about Leah's childhood. When you pleased him, you were rewarded, and when you displeased him, he put you in a hole. Leah, the man I grew up with, the one who controlled everything and everyone I knew, he never laid a hand on us. Leah took a sip of her soda. But some days, you'd wake up and everyone would know that you were unworthy, unclean. No one would speak to you. No one would look at you. It was like you just didn't exist. I heard the implication buried in those words. Your own mother would look right through you. If you wanted anything, food, water, a place to sleep, you had to go to him. And when you were ready to be forgiven, you had to do it yourself. My heart jumped into my throat. Do what? Leah looked down at her angry red wrists. Penance. Cassie? I turned to see Sloane standing a few feet away.
Leah, you're home!
Sloane swallowed. Even in dim lighting, I could see her fingers beginning to tap against her thumbs.
You two probably want to talk, without me.
She turned.
Hold up,
Leah said. Sloane stayed where she was, but didn't turn back to face us.
That's what you were doing, talking to Cassie, because Cassie's easy to talk to. She understands, and I don't.
A breath caught in Sloane's throat.
I just blurt out stupid statistics. I get in the way.
That's not true. Leah stalked toward Sloane. I know I said it, Sloane, but I was lying.
No, you weren't. If Cassie or Dean or Michael had been the one to catch you leaving, you wouldn't have said it. You wouldn't have meant it because Cassie and Dean and Michael could go with you and lie and keep secrets and not say exactly the wrong things at exactly the wrong times.
Sloane turned to face us.
But I can't. I would have been in the way.
Sloane was different from the rest of us. That was easy for me to forget, and impossible for Sloane too.
So?
Leah retorted. Sloane blinked several times. You can't lie worth a damn, Sloane. That doesn't mean you matter any less. Leah stared at Sloane for a few seconds, then seemed to come to a decision. I'm going to tell you something, she said. You, Sloane, not Cassie, not Michael, not Dean. You know the Salem witch trials?
20 people were executed between 1692 and 1693, Sloane said. An additional 7 died in prison, including at least 1 child.
The girls who started the whole thing off with their accusations? Leah took another step toward Sloane. That was me. The cult I grew up in, the leader claimed to have visions. Eventually, I started playing his game. I started having visions, too. And I told everyone that my visions showed me that he was right, that he was just, that God wanted us to obey him. I built myself up by building him up. He believed me. And when he came into my room one night, Leah's voice was shaking. He told me that I was special. He sat on the end of my bed, and as he leaned over me, I started screaming and thrashing. I couldn't let him touch me, so I lied. I said that I'd had a vision, that there was a betrayer in our midst. She closed her eyes. I said the betrayer had to die. I killed a man when I was 9 years old. Leah had told us months ago. If I had to choose between being like you and being like me, Leah continued, holding Sloane's gaze, I'd want to be like you. Leah tossed her hair over her shoulder. Besides, she said, shedding the intensity she'd borne a moment ago like a snake wriggling out of its skin. If you were like Cassie and Michael and Dean and me, you wouldn't be able to do anything with this. Leah reached into her back pocket and pulled out several folded pieces of paper. I wanted to see what was on them, but was still paralyzed by the words Leah had spoken.
A map?
Sloane said, thumbing through the pages. A layout, Leah corrected, of the entire compound, the house, the barns, the acreage, drawn to scale. Sloane wrapped her arms around Leah in what appeared to be the world's tightest hug. Drawn to scale, Sloane whispered, just loud enough that I could hear her, are 3 of my favorite words. Chapter 45. By the time the others woke up the next morning, Sloane had developed a complete blueprint of the Serenity Ranch compound. Agent Sterling helped herself to a cup of coffee, then turned to Leah.
Pull a stunt like that again, and you're out. Out of the program, out of the house.
Not a threat, not a warning, a promise. Leah didn't bat an eye, but when Judd cleared his throat and she turned to face him, she actually winced.
I can keep the FBI from treating you like you're disposable,
Judd told Leah, his voice even and low.
But I can't make you value yourself.
Next to Dean, Judd had been the one constant in Leah's life since she was 13 years old.
I can't force you not to take chances with your own life. But you didn't see me after my daughter died, Leah. If something happens to you, if I go to that place again, I can't promise I'm coming back.
Leah found it easier to be the recipient of anger than affection. Judd knew that, just like he knew she'd read the truth in every word.
Okay,
Leah said, holding up her hands and stepping back.
I'm a bad, bad girl. Point taken. Can we focus on what Sloane has to say?
Dean appeared in the doorway and registered Leah's presence. You're okay?
More or less.
Leah's reply was flippant, but she took a step toward him.
Dean.
No,
Dean said. No, you don't want to hear it? No, she doesn't get to do this to you? Dean didn't elaborate.
Thank goodness you're home, Leah.
Michael strolled into the room.
Dean is awfully prone to talking about feelings when you're MIA.
Would this be an inappropriate time to say aha?
Sloane interjected from the floor.
Because aha!
If Sloane had been even the least bit capable of guile, I would have thought she'd come to Leah's rescue on purpose.
What did you find?
I asked, earning a look from Dean that said he knew quite well that I was capable of throwing Leah a lifeline.
I started with Leah's drawings and compared them to satellite photographs of the Serenity Ranch compound.
Sloane stood, bouncing to the tips of her toes and walking the perimeter of the diagram she'd laid out on the floor.
Everything lined up, except...
Sloane knelt to point a finger at one of the smaller buildings on her diagram.
This structure is roughly 7.6% smaller on the inside than it should be.
That's the chapel.
Leah tossed her ponytail over her shoulder.
No specific religious ties, but you wouldn't know that from looking at it.
I could hear Melody's monotone in my memory. In Serenity, I found balance. In Serenity, I found peace. I turned my attention back to Sloane.
What does it mean that the building is smaller on the inside than it should be?
It means that either the walls are abnormally thick.
Sloane caught her bottom lip in her teeth, then let it go.
Or there's a hidden room.
I didn't have to sink very far into Holland Darby's psyche to conclude that he was the kind of man who hid his secrets well. That's your serenity. That's your peace.
Unfortunately,
Agent Sterling said,
none of that gives me probable cause to search the property.
No, Leah said, reaching into her pocket.
But this does.
She pulled a small glass vial out of her pocket. The liquid inside was milky white.
Not sure what it is, she said,
but Darby keeps his flock well dosed.
He's drugging them.
Dean's stony face showed no signs of softening, toward her or toward the situation. Agent Sterling took the vial from Leah.
I'll get this to the lab. If it's a controlled substance, I can get a warrant to search the compound.
Beside me, Sloane stared at the vial.
I give it even odds that it's some kind of opiate.
Your mother died of an overdose. I profiled Sloane as a matter of instinct, but another part of me couldn't help profiling someone else, something else. Nightshade, and whoever in this town had recruited him. There's a thin line between medicine and poison.
Chapter 46.
It took 24 hours for Agent Sterling to get her warrant, and another hour after that for the FBI to secure the compound, and, more to the point, the compound's owner. By the time Holland Darby and his followers had been sequestered, and the 5 of us were allowed on the premises, I could feel the ticking of the clock. Today is April 5th. The reminder thrummed through my veins as we approached the chapel. Another Fibonacci date. Another body. Briggs hadn't called us. He hadn't asked for help. I shoved that thought out of my mind as I pushed open the chapel door. No religious iconography, Dean commented. He was right. There were no crosses, no statues, nothing to indicate a tie with any established religion. And yet the room was clearly designed to call to mind a religious space. There were pews and altars, tile mosaics on the floor. Stained glass windows casting colored light into the room. "We're looking for a false wall," Sloane said, pacing the perimeter of the room. She stopped in front of a wooden altar near the back. Her fingers deftly searched for a trigger, some kind of release. "Got it!" Sloane's triumph was punctuated by the sound of creaking wood, followed by the whine of rusted hinges. The altar gave way to reveal a hidden room. I took a step forward, but Agent Sterling strode past me. Her right hand on her weapon, she held her left out to Sloane. "Stay here," she said, stepping into the room herself. "It's narrow," Sloane reported, peering into the darkness. "Based on my earlier calculations, it almost certainly runs the entire length of the chapel." I waited. The steady fall of Agent Sterling's footsteps, the only sound in the room. Dean came to stand on one side of me, Michael and Leah on the other. When Agent Sterling reappeared, she holstered her weapon and called for backup. "What did you find?" Dean asked her. If any of the rest of us had asked the question, Agent Sterling might not have responded, but given their history, she was incapable of ignoring Dean. "A staircase." The staircase led to a basement. Not a basement. I corrected myself when it had been deemed safe enough for us to enter. A cell. The walls were thick, soundproof. There were shackles on the wall. There was a decomposed body in the shackles. A second body lay on the floor. The room smelled of decay and death. But it didn't smell recent. "Based on the level of decomposition and taking into account the temperature and humidity levels in this room," Sloane paused as she ran the numbers in her head, "I'd guess our victims have been dead between 9 and 11 years. 10 years ago, my mother and I had left Gaither. 10 years ago, I'd seen a body at the bottom of the stairs. Who are they? I asked the question that everyone was thinking. Who had Holland Darby chained up under his chapel? Whose bodies had been left here to rot and fade away? "Victim number 1 is male." Sloane stepped closer to the body still shackled to the wall. The flesh was nearly non-existent. Bones and decay and rot. My stomach threatened to empty itself. Dean laid a hand on the back of my neck. I leaned into his touch and forced my attention back to Sloane. "The depth and thickness of the pelvic bone," Sloane murmured. "The narrow pelvic cavity, definitely male. Facial bones suggest Caucasian. I'd put height at around 5'11". Not a juvenile, and no signs of advanced age." Sloane studied the body for another 30 or 40 seconds in silence. "He was shackled post-mortem," she added. "Not before." "You built this room for something. For someone." I took in the size of the room. You chained this man's body, even after death. "What about the other victim?" Agent Sterling asked. I knew her well enough to know that she'd already developed her own theories and interpretation of the scene before us, but she wouldn't contaminate a second opinion by letting us see even a hint of what that interpretation was. "Female," Sloane answered. I'd put her age somewhere between 18 and 35. No visible sign of cause of death.
And the male?
Agent Starmans asked.
How did he die?
Blunt force trauma.
Sloane turned to Agent Sterling.
I need to go upstairs now, she said. I need to be not here.
Sloane had seen plenty of bodies, plenty of crime scenes, but since Aaron's death, victims hadn't just been numbers to her. Slipping an arm around her, I led her up the stairs. On the way, we passed Leah, who stood with her back up against Michael's body. As Sloane and I made it up into the fresh air, I heard Leah's ragged whisper. He put them in a hole.
You.
Without order, there is chaos. Without order, there is pain. That's Lorelei's chorus, not yours. You are chaos. You are order. 5 stands before you, sharpening his blade. It's just you and him. 2 had his turn yesterday. A dozen burns on your chest and thighs. And still, you wouldn't tell them what they wanted to hear. You wouldn't tell them to eliminate the problem, to take whatever steps necessary to rid Gaither of the FBI. Not yet. 5 steps forward, blade and eyes gleaming. Closer, closer. The flat of the blade presses against the side of your face. Without order, there is chaos. Without order, there is pain. You smile. They left you all day in this room, thinking that you were Lorelei. They left you roaming free in a room with your own shackles, under the belief that the threat of retribution to you, to Laurel, would keep you in line. They were wrong. You surge forward as the broken shackles fall away. You grab the knife and plunge it into your tormentor's chest. I am chaos, you whisper. I am order. You press your lips against his and twist the blade. I am pain.